Tonight on the Local Live, we've got full coverage of this year's 4th of July festivities in our area. Local officials have some opinions on Uber coming to Westchester. Stay tuned for details. More space for microbreweries in Mamaroneck Village? We've got the info. And New York State Senator George Latimer is already in our studio for the roundtable. You can join the conversation with your calls, emails, and tweets. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Witch. It's Thursday, July the 6th. Welcome to the Local Live. We've got a lot in store for you tonight. Let's get started. This year, Mamaroneck celebrated our country's independence with the annual Firemen's Carnival, followed by a fireworks spectacular at the harbor. After grabbing a bite to eat and riding the Ferris wheel, residents and guests anticipated the fireworks while enjoying the summer Nights on the Sound concert. Starting at 7 p.m., everyone came and enjoyed the sounds of the St. Thomas Orchestra, kicking off the night with a classic rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner, followed by a program for all ages. After the concert, the July 4th fireworks went off at 9:30, filling the sky at the harbor and concluding another beautiful 4th of July in Mamaroneck. Uber is now legal in Westchester, and while some lawmakers are praising the decision to legalize the ride-hailing app, some are coming out against it. In an attempt to combat critics, Westchester County Executive Rob Astorino created a program called Thumbs Up, where if an Uber or Lyft driver is found to have no criminal record, he'll have a thumbs up decal displayed on his vehicle so the rider will know they're in good hands. Even with this program put in place, local officials are having mixed reactions. Reclaim New York Director Brandon Muir has publicly praised the ride-sharing apps becoming legal in Westchester, but he's also thrilled to hear about Astorino's program. A strong opponent to the legalization of the apps, Virginia Perez, who's the chair of the Westchester County Board of Legislators Committee, says that the ride-sharing apps like Uber and Lyft makes unfair competition against traditional taxi companies. Her father was also a taxi driver for many years, so for her, this hot topic is also a personal one. Perez also said if given the opportunity to opt out of having Uber be legal in Westchester, she would. For now, despite the mixed reviews from local lawmakers, you can call for an Uber ride legally in our county. More space for microbreweries? Well, that's what may be a reality in the village of Mamaroneck if the Board of Trustees approves a code remodel to change zoning districts in the C1 and 2 areas. Halftime Beverage, micro-alcohol establishment on Hoyt Avenue, submitted an application for a brew pub addition, sparking the board's decision to consider creating more spaces for this brewery along with other potential establishments. According to the Mamaroneck Review, there's an increased interest regarding smaller-scale breweries, wineries, and distilleries, which have blossomed to 3 times the number since 2012 statewide. Alan Daniels, president of Halftime Beverage, came out to say that microbreweries make good business sense and will have a positive impact on the economy. Keith Waite, a member of the Board of Trustees, said in his statement that he's cautious about any change of the code. He's afraid of potential negative effects on the environment, as well as the lack of parking in the village. He says what breweries like Halftime should rally for instead is more permissive zoning laws around the breweries themselves. Mayor Rosenblum has suggested looser zoning restrictions on the C1 and 2 areas, but is making it clear that he doesn't want any zoning shortcuts along the way. We'll keep you updated on this story as we get more information on when the potential vote on the zoning changes will take place. A horrible accident ended with an arm amputation after a Larchmont landscaper suffered an accident on the job. The accident occurred this past Monday about 3:40 in the afternoon on Barnard Road in the border of Larchmont and New Rochelle. The man has not been identified. Details of the accident have not yet been released. We'll update with any details as they come in. And tonight, LMC TV is mourning the sudden loss of Aaron Meadow. Aaron was a talented lighting designer, a volunteer, a friend, an overall great guy. Aaron was tragically killed in a boating accident this past Saturday. He had just helped us install the new studio lighting in our studio last month. Aaron volunteered his time because he loved our mission of serving the community and creating opportunities for people to explore their creativity. At a memorial service yesterday, many spoke out about how he worked with lights and how he himself was a light to those who knew him. Our condolences to his family and many, many friends. Aaron will be missed very much. With more news in the media, here's Christian Longuera.
Following its reveal of a White Plains expansion, Walters Hot Dogs has confirmed that a third location will be opening in Stamford, Connecticut. This location will be at Harbor Point in Stamford and is expected to open in mid-August. In addition, Walters Hot Dogs was at the National Museum of Immigration at Ellis Island to celebrate the opening of an exhibit that follows the history and heritage of hot dogs in the United States. Besides Walters, Nathan's Famous, Vienna Beef, Sabrett, and Hebrew National were also in attendance at the Hot Dog Summit. The founders of each of these famous establishments all immigrated through Ellis Island and brought with them their own unique take on what would become an iconic American food staple. For more, go to lowhud.com. The restaurant Smokehouse of New York, located at Waverly Place in the village of Mamaroneck, is being sued by the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office over listeria found at the business. The smokehouse is known for its smoked fish and was once recommended by Oprah on her favorite things list. While the lawsuit does not claim that any tainted fish were sold to the public, it states that the location failed to comply with federal health standards and tested positive for listeria. For more, go to lowhud.com. The Tappan Zee Bridge will be renamed after the late Governor Mario Cuomo later this year. The renaming would start with the current bridge and then carry on to the newer two-span bridge as the old one is torn down. This decision has been met with opposition, especially by Catherine Wilson Conroy, the daughter of the late Governor Malcolm Wilson, for whom the bridge is currently named after, as well as Westchester County Executive Rob Astorino, who says that Mario Cuomo had nothing to do with the construction of the old or new bridge and has no connection to Westchester or Rockland counties other than being governor. For more, go to usatoday.com. Kristen Browd, a transgender woman, is running for town supervisor of Newcastle in Westchester County. If elected, Browd would be the first transgender public official in the New York State history. An attorney and former TV news reporter and correspondent for several stations including CBS and CNN, she's already been endorsed by the Democratic Party and the Working Families Party. Browd is currently in the process of getting enough signatures to get her name on the ballot. For more, go to theloopny.com. The Village of Mamaroneck has plenty of fun and exciting upcoming events for the rest of the summer. These include Tiki Invasion, Movies on the Sand, Summer on the Avenue block parties, and free concerts with Summer Nights on the Sound. You can find the full list and more info on the Village of Mamaroneck Recreation Department Facebook page. If you can find it online, you can find it in the media. I'm Christian Longuera.
Did you know that if you missed the last government meeting, you can watch it on our website? Just go to lmctv.org, click on videos, then click on municipal meetings, scroll down to find the meeting you want, or use the search function in the upper right corner and type in the name or date of the meeting. Then watch. You can see the full agenda and jump to a specific agenda item. It's all a click away at lmctv.org.
Welcome to the Roundtable. I'm Maura Carlin. Tonight we're talking Albany, politics, and the Sound Shore with our guest, New York State Senator George Latimer. And you, of course, can join the conversation. Call, email, or tweet. The contact information is on your screen. George, thank you for joining us. You've represented this community for quite a while, whether at the County Board of Legislators or up in Albany in both the Assembly and the Senate. So the 2017 legislative session just ended. Can you give us an update on what did and did not happen?
Sure, and Maura, it's a pleasure to be with you here. I love the local live, and I'm happy to be on it whenever it's timely. The session for the state legislature really has two sections to it. The first half of the year, which is January, February, March, culminates in the state budget. And then the second half of the year, we do general legislation, April, May, and June. And we closed our session a week later because there were some unresolved issues that had to be bunched together in a single big omnibus bill. And these bills package different policy issues. We'll probably talk about a few of them here, in which one vote is a yes vote for everything in the package and a no vote is a no for everything in the package. From a practical standpoint, when we look back on the year, the major things that most Westchester residents would like to see, reduction of property taxes by relieving of mandates, campaign reform, finance reform, and other types of progressive reforms, the concerns that people have over a host of different policy issues that have been around the society for a long time. None of those got resolved in the legislative session.
None.
None of them. And what you really have is you've got a functional gridlock, because you do have a state assembly that has a Democratic majority and a state Senate that has a Republican majority, and the philosophical differences between them make it impossible to get compromise on an issue. I'll use one example: early voting. 34 states have early voting, so that it's not just election day that you have to show up on. You have the opportunity any number of days in advance, a week, 2 weeks. We have what I consider to be a very reasonable bill for 8 days of early voting, and the philosophical disagreements, Democrats are for it, Republicans are against it. The bill doesn't move, and it hasn't moved over the last few years. So what did we do that could find the way through the needle, the eye of the needle, that both parties could agree with? They're important issues, but at a lesser level of importance. In this closeout of the session, for example, we banned marriages for those under the age of 17. There are issues historically where there was parental consent if you were 14, 15, or 16, but it was pretty clear that that was abuse, and primarily abuse of young girls, that fed into that, sexual trafficking and so forth. So the ban that we passed, that's been signed into law, was a plus in that direction.
Okay.
And there are others of that sort of magnitude that we dealt with as the closeout. New York City schools, mayoral control may not matter too much to us up here in the suburbs very much. Very important element. And there are people obviously in the viewing audience that are teachers in the New York City school system, and to change the structure of it would be sort of at the last minute really negative in terms of the functioning of the
And that was the last minute bill that held you guys up there.
Right.
And it was packaged with something else?
Well, what it was is that the Republicans in the Senate, and I'm not trying to be partisan about this, this is sort of where they came out. The Republicans in the Senate wanted certain provisions that would benefit charter schools, and primarily in New York City, which is where charter schools are robust. And they held out on mayoral control until they could get a compromise on that. So in the final, behind-the-scenes, three-men-in-a-room scenario where these negotiations were done, there was a benefit given to New York City Police and Fire. There was a benefit given to real estate interests in Manhattan for development. The charter school issues were addressed outside of the bill. And then inside the bill, there was New York City mayoral control, and the naming of the bridge came in that bill. So one vote, you voted yes on everything, and they included necessary bills in upstate counties. So it passed, and then we completed our work, such as it is.
So let's backtrack a couple of months and go back to the budget.
Yeah.
And let me just ask, are taxes going up for New York residents or the residents around here?
No, in fact, we have the lowest state taxes. Primary taxes from New York State are income taxes. And New York State, as we sit here today, has the lowest level of state income taxation for those of us making anywhere from about $300,000 a year or less than we've had in 60 years. People don't grasp that. And if you think about how you file your taxes, oftentimes if you have a preparer do it, you really, they'll say how much you're going to get back, and that's sort of the end of the discussion. You don't think of it the way you do your property taxes, which is the much more urgent tax that you pay, and your property taxes you pay to your town, your village, your county governments, and your school districts. So state income taxes actually have been stable and reduced over the last number of years. Now, if you're in the higher income brackets, if you're in that $1.5 million a year income, then there was an increase a number of years ago in taxes. It didn't increase this year, but that increase that was negotiated a couple of years ago remained in effect. And that applies to people with very high adjusted gross incomes. And there are plenty of those people in this area, too.
How did the renaming of the bridge come about? It seems sort of sudden. I mean, I realize it got packaged, but...
Yeah, no, it was put in a package. Look, I think Governor Andrew Cuomo, current governor, wanted to honor his father. And he was able to negotiate with the Senate Republican leader and the Assembly Democratic speaker to put that naming in the bill.
Okay, was it honoring his father or furthering a political...
That's the subjectivity that everybody has to judge. But I think the bottom line was the naming of it was not a standalone vote. It wasn't a yes or no vote made by us. It was made as part of a package of things that in the package would be irresponsible to vote no for. In fact, that's where it was almost near unanimous in both houses. Now, if it was up to me, or if I had the opportunity to be responsible for naming a major public work, I wouldn't do it that way. I'd create a committee. I'd have some people with historical experience on it, and I'd have some folks who were involved in some of the communities in and around the bridge or the tunnel or whatever it was you would name. And I'll give you an example at the county level. We have two past county executives, Andrew O'Rourke and Al Del Bello, both of whom died within the last few years. Terrific county executives. They both deserve to have something named after them. And rather than stuff it into a bill, what I would rather do is I'd rather have a discussion about that, and then a recommendation is made after some study and some public input. But this is how it's gone. So as the new bridge is built, this is its name. Now, let me remind you that over the years, things get renamed. And there was a Brendan Byrne Arena, if you recall, when Brendan Byrne was governor. And then later it became other things before it was all said and done. So I'm not looking to assume anything is going to happen, but for the people who are agitated over this particular decision, you know, we'll see what the future brings.
Hot issue around here has been allowing Uber, Lyft, and other ride-sharing apps. It seemed like it was only controversial in Westchester.
Well, the state passed a law earlier this year that allowed for ride sharing, and for whatever reason, New York City has it, and the rest of New York State did not, and we're the outlier. We're the only part of the United States that did not have ride sharing baked into the cake. And so when the law was passed this year, there were a couple of protections that were put into it, but there were objections concerned about Lyft and Uber and any of the other ride-sharing companies. I tend to believe there's going to be more of them coming to compete with the existing companies, as always happens in business. So the state passed a law allowing for it, but it allowed jurisdictions with 100,000 people or more to opt out if they wanted to. And so that allowed in this area, Westchester County, and the city of Yonkers, or the city of Yonkers, to make a decision to opt out. It also applied to Suffolk, Nassau, and some other cities. So none of those other communities had a discussion about opting out. It appeared that the county executive and the majority of the board of legislators were moving toward an opt-out situation. And they made the argument, and there's some element of concern in here, that your standard taxi drivers are vetted, they have a fingerprint review, and the background check and so forth, and that is not the case in Uber drivers, because Uber drivers are not full-time employees. You know, when they flip on and they flip off, they're treated as outside consultants. And this is all part of the financial model to make ride sharing affordable, and why it differs from a standard taxi or limousine company. So in any event, there was a discussion about opting out, and then when they had a major announcement just before the vote, the county executive made the decision to accept a voluntary system.
Right, we did a story on that before, the Thumbs Up program.
And so the Thumbs Up program represented a step towards some additional check on Uber drivers, on Lyft drivers, and then it went to bat. But there's no question in my mind, when I voted for the bill in Albany, easily 80% of the people in this community and in most jurisdictions, they've experienced ride sharing in other parts of the country, in the city, and in some communities you don't really have a robust taxi and limousine presence. You might have it in the Mount Vernons and the Yonkers of the world, but you don't have them everywhere. So ride sharing fills a need that isn't filled by anything else.
There are a few issues I want to just cover kind of quickly. Schools funding. How did Mamaroneck and Rhinebeck do?
Both communities got additional funding, but not as much as we fought for.
And Mamaroneck didn't get percentage-wise as much as Rhinebeck did.
That's correct.
And is there a reason?
Well, you know, there's a formula involved that takes into account the size and of the student population, the wealth of the district. It's a rather complicated formula. What we as legislators do is we go in and we advocate. But frankly, we advocate universally. We want every one of our districts to get more money, and every other senator and assemblyman is doing the same thing. So for our purposes, it's a stronger argument when I argue for Portchester or Yonkers, because those are communities of much obvious greater need. The relative wealth of Rye City, Harrison, or the Rhinebeck district, the Mamaroneck district, make it harder for us to get additional money, which we justify, but there's a limited pool of money. We added $1 billion in spending on direct aid to K-12 education, and that $1 billion, a huge sum of money, dissipates pretty fast when you start spreading it out from New York City to Buffalo. So in both cases, we could have done better. We did better, but we could have done significantly better.
Now, is this something that's done in the Education Committee, which is, you're the ranking member there, or is this as part of the Budget Committee?
This is all part of the dysfunction of Albany. You know, the harsh reality of it is, and I don't accept it, I'm explaining it because it is what exists. But if I had the magic wand or I got the steering wheel in my hand, I would steer the ship completely differently than what we see now. But what we see now is hyperpartisanship. And I made this point last year when I was on the ballot for re-election. There's a hyperpartisanship which says if you run the chamber, you run it your way, you line up your votes from your party, you ignore the other party, and you ignore the needs of the communities that represent the other party. It's almost like you should have the temerity to vote for somebody in the minority party, therefore you deserve to be shut out of resources and funding. And I think the whole system is bankrupt. And I think average people get that too. When a handful of people are making these decisions and most of the rest of the people are either rubber stamping yes or no these decisions, that's not democracy. That's not what we signed on for in 1776.
Well, I went and looked up the bills that you've proposed in this legislative term. It looked like there were something over 50. Does that sounds about right to you? And it seemed like they're all stuck in committee. Is that what you're talking about?
I am a Democrat in a Republican chamber. And by the way,
that's what I want to talk about.
If I were a Republican assemblyman sitting here in a Democratic chamber, I'd have the same exact argument. The bills that I can advance as a Democratic senator in the minority are generally home rule bills. So Mamaroneck Village needed to dededicate a piece of land at Harbor Island to deal with the sewer issue. We could get that passed. Rydetown Park needed to change their ability to contract over 20 years for certain kinds of services, and we got that passed. Those kinds of things happen. But the more cosmic issues don't get passed by a person in the minority party. I had a bill that I was very proud of to extend the hate crimes protections to cover community centers that are sponsored by a religious institution without it being itself a religious institution. Think of the JCC of Mid-Westchester or the Don Bosco Center in Portchester. And that hate crimes expansion came out of all of the crank phone calls that came earlier in the spring. So the bill got changed a little bit. A Republican sponsored it, and it got passed. My original bill didn't pass. I get credit for having a good idea, but the actual law passes with someone in the minority.
But there's one bill that you proposed that does relate to Westchester, which is that the state should be paying tax on property in Westchester as it does for other counties.
It does.
That's a local thing.
Right.
Why does that get stuck?
Well, I think the problem is that there were deals that were struck for Rockland County and Putnam County that allowed for the state to pay for land, whether it's a prison or parkland and what have you, and the state, in lieu of taxes, makes a payment to Rockland County to cover what would otherwise be taxes. Well, you have, Rye City has playland in its backyard. That's a county facility, but you have state facilities around, and there's no taxation that compensates the community for the public services they provide, the police and fire and sanitation and so forth. So I felt that if the deal was good for Rockland or Putnam, it should be good for Westchester.
So, but my question is why it's not moving.
And the reason why it didn't pass is because in our House, there's 2 Democratic senators from Westchester. We're the only county north of New York City that has 2 Democratic senators. Every other one has a Republican.
So let's talk about Albany politics, because if you really count who's with which party, the Democrats really have the majority. So, and people I speak to are confused about this. So I'm going to ask you to explain it instead of my explanations.
I don't know if you're old enough to remember Red Skelton. But if you do remember Red Skelton, I do. I'm of the age that I do. Red Skelton would tell a joke, and if nobody laughed, he'd say, "I can tell it, but I can't explain it." So I can tell you, but I can't put a justification behind it. On Election Day last November, 2016, 63 seats in the New York Senate. 32 of them elected a person on the Democratic line. 31 of them elected individuals on the Republican line. So basic math, 32 Democrats, 31 Republicans, Democrats in charge. Not so fast. 9 of the people who were elected as Democrats chose to coordinate their efforts with the 31 Republicans to organize the Senate under Republican rule, continued Republican rule, because previously the Republicans had a flat-out majority. So there was a net losing of seats, but the end result is that the Republicans still control. The same people who ran committees, the Insurance Committee and the Health Committee and the Higher Education Committee, same people under this term, under this coalition of these 9 Democrats. Why did they break away? Different reasons. One individual who broke away represents a community that has got a heavy population of ultra-Orthodox folks who are very conservative on social issues, and though he is a Democrat, he feels more comfortable on those issues with Republicans than he does with mainstream Democrats. You have 8 Democrats in the Independent Democratic Conference who broke away. What they do is they get certain benefits by joining forces with the Republicans that they might not get if they were part of the regular Democratic mainstream, you know, committee assignments and certain things. Each one has their own individual rationale for why they do it. But the end result of it is that you have a state Senate that has a Republican functioning majority, and so when the issue of early voting comes up, it doesn't come to the floor. When protection of a woman's right to choose is brought up as a bill, it doesn't come to the floor to vote on. Climate change legislation doesn't come to the floor. It comes to the floor in the Assembly. It's passed in the Assembly. They had a robust debate on single payer in the Assembly, not so in the Senate. So it comes down to, at the end of the day, the voters of New York have to know who they're voting for, have to know what it is that the various candidates, myself included, stand for, and then make the determination if they're prepared to have people represent them on the surface who seem to be connected to their philosophy, but in practical fact are not. And it's not for me to tell anybody what to do, but it is to sort of lay out this complicated case. Hey, you know, it's November. Guys are watching the NFL. You know, folks are going to the shopping mall. They're not paying attention to these details.
Okay, well, let's move on to the effect of D.C., Washington, D.C., on Albany. And part of it, the divisiveness, is it spilling over?
I think to some extent it is. The political dialogue has become more coarse over the years. You've mentioned that I've you know, been involved in government for a long time, and I've represented Mamaroneck for a good long time, at Larchmont and Rye as well. And you know, I certainly recall a relationship between Republicans and Democrats that, while differing in philosophy and ideology, were cooperative in personal interaction and willing to find common ground. And that was true as recently as 15 years ago when Paul Noto, Republican, former mayor of the village, headed the Republicans in the county legislature, and I headed the Democrats. And we'd meet, we had our disagreements, we liked each other well enough to try to work together, we got a lot done. And we got things done that were satisfactory to Paul, and things were done to me. We've moved away from that, and the politics of attack are different.
I'm going to interrupt you because we actually have emailed questions here, and
Sure.
as much as I want to talk about health care and Medicaid,
Fire away.
one, what is your take on Westchester's airport privatization? And I guess part of the reason that comes up is because you've announced that you're running for county executive.
And regardless of that, I think it's a bad idea to move in the direction we're doing for 2 reasons. Number one, you are looking at a deal that is a bad deal as you analyze a major asset and you're monetizing it with a big upfront payment and then very little money in the back of it. It almost looks like you are selling something because you need the cash right away. So it's a bad deal.
So you don't like the structure of it.
Bad deal on that level. And the other thing is there's a big principle involved here. When you privatize a service that has been otherwise public, you take it out of the ability of public officials to control what happens at these places. It is a policy decision that you ought to have on the merits of the policy. Do you, resident of Rye Brook, do you want that airport that sits next to you to be determined by a corporation what they think is right or wrong, or do you want to have input on it through your elected officials? And I'm afraid that in both of those cases, because of the monetizing of the deal and the money looks so attractive, that the plan will take away the ability of people to impact something that is going to have a tremendous impact on them, and it could lead to a tremendous growth in the airport, which is bad for the environment, bad for the neighbors who live around it. And so I think on both levels it's a bad deal.
Someone emailed me earlier wanting to know, how would you handle the controversial affordable housing mandate differently than County Executive Astorino?
Well, I think the unfortunate reality is that the county executive made the decision that he wanted to fight about it right at the outset. And you can't go back 8 years. I certainly was not county executive 8 years ago. But at the beginning of this process, you needed to sit down and negotiate, not get into a confrontation level. And I think a lot of that has to do with the ideology. You understand, you've seen the rhetoric. A lot of it was rhetoric that said the Obama administration, the federal government has overreached, and they're trying to tell us what to do in our communities. It's a little ironic now, 8 years later, different president, different set of overreaching. You know, now this president wants all of your voting records. And
I wanted to talk about that.
But the upshot of it is what I would do if I do become county executive, and I've said this sort of to be funny, but I'd get on the Amtrak train in New Rochelle. I'd go down to Union Station. I'd go downstairs and take the red line to Metro Center, where you get the yellow line to go to L'Enfant Plaza.
Right.
And you go right to the offices and you negotiate. And I say the mechanism to get there so you know, I know how to get there. And that's important to understand, that if I'm county executive, if that is the will of the people, that I will negotiate. And I'll negotiate hard. I'm not going to give anything away. But I'm not going in there with an ideological attitude that, oh, you're trying to kill us. I'm going to go in there saying, let's practically put this behind us. We've lost $35 million in federal money, in aid, because we took this strategy of confrontation rather than cooperation.
One last question that was emailed in.
Sure.
Should cities collaborate with Immigration Custom Enforcement, ICE, and exchange information about immigration status?
I think the smart strategy for a city, a village, a town is to have the strategy that they do already, which is community policing. You develop a relationship between the immigrant community and the police department of confidence and cooperation. Why do I say that? Because if you have, God forbid, if you have somebody in an apartment next door who is beating up his girlfriend and there's domestic violence, and if you don't feel you can be honest and reach out to the police, you won't call them.
Well, I think the question is really, should locals turn over
Well, no, I'm
to
giving
ICE?
you but I'm giving you the backup to that.
Okay.
If you maintain a community policing structure, you don't worry about the status of immigration of the person you're dealing with. You're dealing with them in the here and now on whether a crime has been committed and how to solve it. If a court comes in with proper legal documentation, then you're not going to, at any level, city, town, even the state, we're not going to be able to stop a federal judge. If someone's holding a warrant in their hands and they want to put their hands on me, they're going to do that, and no government is going to stop it. But I think the important thing is, do you cooperate proactively? And my attitude would be, maintain community policing standards. Don't make your local police department an arm of ICE. And then if you determine that there is an individual and he is a major criminal, and he needs to be taken and deported as the response, that's different. But that's not a standardized, are you here properly documented, let's round you up and let's bus you off to someplace.
Okay. Should Governor Cuomo has taken the position with respect to the investigation of federal voting fraud that New York would not be turning over personal information about voters. What's your position on that?
I think he's right, and so are the other 40 states that are resisting this. As I just said, people who criticize the Obama administration overreach now have to ask themselves, is this federal overreach or this is good? Here, Maura, real simple. There was no voting fraud in 2016 that was substantial. Donald Trump won the Electoral College and he won the presidency. He lost the popular vote. There's no imaginary 5 million things that are out there. And to be quite honest with you, I think it's a bogus argument. It's an offensive bogus argument.
Healthcare and Medicaid. You know, the healthcare discussion is centered in D.C., but the states are affected by it. And
very much so.
Governor Cuomo has talked about imposing a county tax to fund the Medicaid shortage. Can you explain that and talk about where things stand?
I'm going to go in the weeds in order to give you the explanation. But here it is,
Policy
as
wonk
quickly
here.
as I can. Medicaid is a federal-state cooperative program. In most of the states, the feds pay for 50% and the states pay for 50%. There's a base program, and then you option on to do additional things. Dental care is not a mandated cost. South Carolina doesn't provide Medicaid coverage for dental care. New York State does. We opted in. The size and the scope of the New York program covers more people and more services than any other state in the nation. That's why we have the high Medicaid bill that we do. Back in the 1960s, Governor Rockefeller cut a deal with counties, and I guess the mayor of New York City, in which the counties would pay for a portion of the Medicaid costs that come from their county. Why would the county sign on to that? Because they were afraid that all the Medicaid costs were going to come out of New York City, and they only wanted to pay for what came out of Westchester. Over the years, Medicaid expenses have grown. And long-term care, which is now part of Medicaid coverage, which is I get sick enough, I spend all my assets, and now I'm in a nursing home, and now I'm on Medicaid, even though I didn't start out life as indigent and so forth. So it's a much more expensive program. So the federal program had a rider put into it in both houses. It hasn't passed yet, so we don't know what the final product's going to be. But it was put in by some upstate Republican congressman, in which they said we're going to eliminate the counties having to make any contribution toward that. Now, I happen to favor that, but I favor it phased in, not in a lump sum, because it's a $2.3 billion hit to the state budget, and it's a relief of $2.3 billion to the county budgets in the aggregate. So, what happens if it passes as is? The county governments will have less to pay for Medicaid. The state will have more to pay, so Governor Cuomo threatens He obviously can't do it alone. He threatens that the state could impose a separate levy that would equal the same amount of dollars and put that on county governments. I don't know how credible the threat is, but it is part of the negotiating that is going on over the federal health plan, and we won't know what we're going to do until we see what Congress passes.
Well, but all of that filters down to all of us. Does that get factored into additional costs when
Well,
they're
here's the deal.
doing,
Right
they're doing
now,
scoring?
if your property taxes are going to reduce and your income taxes are going to go up, if you're a property owner, that benefits you. If you live in an apartment, that's a negative to you, because you pay income tax, but you don't pay property tax except through perhaps your rent, and that's structured around other things. There are people who pay a relatively small amount of property taxes, but their income is very, very low. Senior citizens who've owned a home for many, many years, and the property tax bill chokes them. How much do you pay a year? $10,000. Somebody else is paying $80,000, but their adjusted gross income is in the millions of dollars a year. So the real missing element of this is to correlate property taxes based on ability to pay, based on income. The phrase is called a circuit breaker, but it doesn't sound like anything that has to do with taxes. It sounds like something in your basement when you're shutting off something. And it's more complicated, obviously, than people will want to listen to. What's important to know is that you elect me as your representative. I understand the issues. I can explain them. You know, I'll go to the summit, or I'll have coffee at the Nautilus Diner with someone or with a group of people, with the League of Women Voters, and we'll explain this in detail, because I understand the principles, and there are choices to be made, and they will affect you. Nothing is for free, and Medicaid coverage will have to be funded through some mechanism, and we have to decide, do we want to put it on this budget with this impact, or this budget with that impact?
We have an email. What is your take on Indian Point, and were you in the what County Executive Astorino called the back room with three men?
No, I wish if I was one of the three men in the back room, a lot of things would be different. But the decision actually wasn't made with the three men in the room. It was made by Entergy. It was a business decision. They, first of all, if you follow what's happening in the energy field, it is much cheaper to generate energy through natural gas now than it is through nuclear. And that particular power plant, as the one further upstate that Entergy runs, requires some significant capital improvement. They made a business decision that says we're going to go through regulatory hurdles. We have big capital to put into this thing, and the cost of generating energy from nuclear is much more expensive than the lower priced natural gas. Plus, there's a movement toward more renewable energy, which is a good movement, more solar that we can get, more of other possible sources of fuel. So they decided we're getting out of the nuclear power plant business. Governor Cuomo, who's long wanted the plant closed, says, great, let's cut the deal. We'll let you stay open for 4 years, maybe 8, and then we'll shut it down. Now, from a county standpoint, that decision has been made by the business, and the state governor has agreed to it. There was no vote ever by the legislature to accept it. So where we are now is we have the responsibility to deal with the aftermath of that. What do we do with the 1,000 lost jobs? What do we do with the lost money for the village and the town?
And is that where the local discussion comes in, along with discussing with NRC?
And I would argue that, and I understand the county executive's running for governor, everybody's running for something. Governor wants to be president, everybody's got ambition. I'm one of them, so I'm okay with that. But rather than argue with the next level up, because you're going to be in a competition with them, my belief would be you sit down and you try to work out a plan, and the county should be sort of the leader of those four bodies, because the county gets property tax payments, the equivalent of tax payments, and you go to the state and you negotiate the best possible package you can get to soften the blow. Now, we're going to need to replace that energy. That wattage has to be replaced, and that's going to involve lots of different things. Part of it is renewable energies, part of it is conservation, but it's going to take a very hard-headed plan. There are proposals out there that argue that they can reach that amount of wattage and replacement, and that's where we ought to put our energy, not into lawsuits to try to undo a decision that the business itself wanted to make.
We've got emails coming in, and we're running out of time, so let me try to take these two, if I can get this right. There's a petition in Port Chester opposing federal funding to Port Chester in exchange for sharing information about immigration status. Do you know anything about that?
I'm not familiar with that. I'll have to do some homework.
And supposedly there's a town hall meeting now full of immigrants. So you don't
right now, as we're taping.
Yeah.
I was not aware of the meeting. I'll certainly delve into it. Obviously, something like that may not directly involve the state, but I want to be conversant in it. But I'm not familiar with it.
And we'll make this the last question. Why would you like to be Westchester County Executive, and what would you do differently?
Well, that's more than we're going to answer in the time left. Let me put it this way, thematically. I grew up in one of the poorest neighborhoods in this county, on the south side of Mount Vernon. I happen to live in a wealthy community, not myself in the wealthiest of houses in the wealthy community. I've lived the alpha and the omega of this county. And this county has been poorly served by a very narrow vision. That narrow vision says, don't worry about policy, only worry about how much it costs. All you need to worry about is taxes. If I level taxes out, if they're truly leveled, and I don't believe they are, that's all you need to worry about. And all the other policies be damned. I don't believe that. I think this county can be governed wisely and compassionately and tough at the same time. And my corporate background, my experience in different legislative bodies, I think have proven it. And there are people in Peekskill that may not know who I am, but I like to think the people of Larchmont and Mamaroneck have seen me in action over a long period of time. I'm a very regular guy. There's no imperial county executive entourage that's going to happen if I have that opportunity. And if I do, I expect to be in the same Nautilus Diner, the same Mamaroneck Diner settings, the same LMC TV settings as an approachable, reachable executive of the county government.
And we will end it there. George Latimer, thank you for joining us, and thank you
Ma'am.
for all of your emailed questions. Stay tuned. We've got more community stories coming right up. Things were really...
Last week, we gave you a sneak peek of the much-anticipated Fireman's Parade. Well, here's the full scoop, brought to you by Marcella Milder.
Welcome to the 70th Annual Fireman's Parade, which kicks off a week filled with carnival rides, games, food, and fireworks. We're here bringing you the full coverage of one of Mamaroneck's biggest events, so let's go see what all the hype's about. This year brought a large turnout, with over 30 different fire departments marching. The former chief, David Vaughn, acted as officiator, announcing each division in this year's parade.
This parade has been going on since the 40s, I believe, and it is probably one of the highlights of the entire village of Mamaroneck throughout the course of the year. We have an all-voluntary fire department in Mamaroneck. Everyone may not know that. Many municipalities in the Sound Shore community have career drivers, and they're backed up by volunteers. Other Sound Shore communities are totally career. The village of Mamaroneck counts on you to come out and help us out as an all-volunteer department.
Residents and guests came out to celebrate this special event, participating not only in the parade, but in the Fireman's Carnival, which helps raise money for Mamaroneck's volunteer fire department.
To give them a lot of credit. They put their lives on the line every day for us, and we have to give them a lot of credit for what they do for us, and we should be very thankful that we have such a great volunteer department in the village of Mamaroneck.
It's a beautiful night. It brings everybody outside. It gives everybody a spirit of camaraderie. We see people we haven't seen in a long time, make connections. This is small town America. This is what it's all about.
The firemen and women looked excited as they rep their towns and villages.
Go right. Go Parkers.
Go Terrytown! Woo! I just joined. They're all very, very welcoming and very nice, and it's like a big family. I love it.
It probably started off, as the whole brother thing. We're all volunteer fire department, and I think we're one of the strongest, volunteer fire departments around. So it's nice,
Our Carnival is one of the fundraisers that we have to support the department, and we thank everybody and we appreciate everybody being here tonight.
The day quickly turned into night as the festivities continued, but all parade goers knew the real reason for attendance wasn't the entertainment, but to say thank you to our firemen.
It's very important to celebrate them because they help save lives.
I love our firemen.
We love our firemen. What do we have to say to our firemen, guys? Thank you! We're looking forward to next year's parade. For the Local Live, I'm Marcella Milder.
Muffin's beautiful coat is splattered with tones of cinnamon, nutmeg, flour, and a nose that could have been dipped in confectioner's sugar. She loves being petted, and she'll stand on her legs for a head rub. Muffin is cautious at first, but once she warms up, you'll be her personal masseuse. And here's Emilio, a super adorable dog who always looks like he's smiling. He's 1.5 years old, weighs 11 pounds. He's friendly with other dogs and very sweet. For information about how to adopt Emilio or Muffin or for other adorable pets, please go to this website, ny-petrescue.org. Making an online donation to support the Local Live is easy. You can go to lmctv.org and click on the donate button in the upper right corner. Your donation will help us to create a background set. We really appreciate it. You're always welcome to volunteer and become an intern, and we'd love to hear from you. Send an email to the Local Live at lmctv.org. Join our crew. Thank you so much for watching our show. That's all for tonight. I'm Mike Witch. See you next week for another episode of the Local Live.